This is the voice in the wilderness of the people coming to you in the great wind. This is the day that EZER has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I pray that EZER has kept you in good health with great strength, and that He has protected you from all danger, from all accidents, and from all iniquity, as you continue to call upon His name and sing His praise and rejoice and be glad. Greetings, my brothers and sisters, for EZER have kept us to see a beautiful day. EZER has kept us to see the end of another year and the beginning of another one. So let us never forget to rejoice and be glad and give thanks unto EZER for everything that He has given us. We must also reflect on the season that we are in, and when EZER removed our ancestors out of the land of Egypt, and we must reflect and think about the experience that they had from Egypt to the promised land. And now we are in captivity again, and we are waiting on EZER, our Redeemer, for Him to gather us from all the places where He scattered us because of our transgressions. When we turn back to Him and call upon His name and do His commandments, and He will return us into His land again, a second time. So we must remember this and give thanks for it and sing praises unto EZER for all His great mercies. But today, my brothers and sisters, I have two questions. And the first question is, who was brought up out of Egypt? The second question is, who brought them up out of Egypt? And for the answer for the first question, we go to Exodus chapter 20, verse 2. EZER, your Redeemer and Savior, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall not have any other besides me as your Redeemer and Savior. To question number 2, we go to Exodus 20, verses 22. And EZER said to Moses, to Shemaiah, say to the children of Israel, you have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. Here EZER is saying that he spoke. Here we see EZER reminding Shemaiah and telling him to remind the children of Israel, let them know that they heard him speak to them from heaven. Now let us go in our book and listen to the prophets whom EZER sent in His name to bring His words unto us. And let us hear what they had to say concerning this matter. Now let us see with our eyes, or hear with our ears, what EZER is saying to us through His prophets, whom He sent to speak to us, the men of EZER. In Genesis 46, verse 4, EZER says, I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again. And now Joseph will close your eyes. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 8 to 10. So EZER have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians, and to bring them up from that land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of EZER-IAH is come unto me, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppress them. Come now, and I will send you unto Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of EZER-IAH, out of Egypt. Now, who is the I speaking? It's IAH. Who is he taking out? His people. Who is his people? IAH people are the people he gave his name, his commandments, his promises, and the land that is called by his name. IAH's people are called Israelites. In Amos chapter 11 verse 1, we read, when EZER-IAH was a youth, IAH loved him, and out of Egypt IAH called his son. EZER-IAH is the son of IAH, and he is the one IAH took out of Egypt, not JC. In Exodus chapter 6, verses 6, we read, say therefore to the sons of EZER-IAH, I am IAH, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from their bondage. I will also redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgment. In Exodus chapter 6, verse 7, then I will take you for my people, and I will be your redeemer, and you shall know that I am IAH, your redeemer, who brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. Exodus 7 verse 5, the Egyptians shall know that IAH is your redeemer when IAH stretch his hand on Egypt and bring out the sons of EZER-IAH from their midst. EZER-IAH is the name given to Jacob. It's not Israel. This name Israel is from Babylon, where all these changes were made to the name of IAH and was put in the Babylonian Talmud, the book of the Jews. The IS in the name Israel is for Isis from Egypt. The RA is for Amun-Ra, the chief of the Egyptian God. The EL also worship in Egypt, from Egypt to Babylon, from Babylon to Rome, from Rome to the whole world, through Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And here you have the Trinity, the triangle. Then they put one triangle in another triangle, and you see this for their symbol, Israel. We read in the book of Amos chapter 5 verse 26, but you have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch and Shinnum, your image, the star of your God, that you make to yourselves. Therefore, I will cause you to go into captivity beyond Damascus, says your Redeemer, whose name is IAH of hosts. My people, David our father had no star. He had the name of IAH, as he told it to Goliath. He come in the name of IAH. Read Psalm 79 and Psalm 83. Our enemies brought this among IAH people and into his land. Now, let us go into the book of Exodus chapter 12 verse 17. You shall also observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on that very day I have brought your host out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as a permanent ordinance. Exodus chapter 12 verse 51. And on that same day I brought the sons of EZER-IAH out of the land of Egypt by the host. Exodus 13 verse 9. And it shall serve as a sign to you on your hand and as a reminder that the law of IAH may be in your mouth. For with a powerful hand IAH brought you out of Egypt. In Exodus 13 verse 14. And it be when your sons ask you in time to come, saying, what is this? Then you shall say to them, with a powerful hand IAH brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery. Exodus 13 verse 16. So it shall serve for a token, for IAH's powerful hand he brought us out of Egypt. Exodus 16 verse 32. Then Shemaiah said, this is what IAH has commanded. Let an omer full of it be kept throughout your generations, that they may see the bread that IAH fed you with in the wilderness, when IAH brought you out of the land of Egypt. Shemaiah was the name given to him by the children of EZER-IAH. See this in the book of Joshua, chapter 68, verse 31. And the omer full is the measure of manna that were to be kept for the generations of the children of EZER-IAH to see when they visit the house of IAH. In Exodus 18, verse 1, now Jethro, the priest of Midian, Shemaiah's father-in-law, heard of all that IAH had done for Shemaiah and for EZER-IAH his people, how IAH had brought EZER-IAH out of Egypt. Exodus chapter 20 verse 2. I am IAH your Redeemer, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. In Exodus chapter 29 verse 46. They shall know that IAH is the Redeemer, who brought them out of the land of Egypt. For him to dwell with them, he is IAH the Redeemer. Exodus chapter 32 verse 7. Then IAH spoke to Shemaiah, go down at once, for your people whom you brought up from the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. Exodus 32 verse 11. Then Shemaiah entreated IAH his Redeemer and said, IAH, why does your anger burn against your people whom you have brought out from the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? Exodus 32 verse 12. Why should the Egyptians speak, saying with evil intent, he brought them out to kill them in the mountains and to destroy them from the face of the earth? Turn from your burning anger and change your mind about doing harm to your people. Leviticus chapter 11 verse 45. For I am IAH who brought you up from the land of Egypt to be your mighty one. You shall be holy, for IAH is holy. Leviticus 19 verse 36. You shall have just the balance, just weight, a just ephah, and a just hin. I am IAH your Redeemer, who brought you out from the land of Egypt. In Leviticus 22 verse 33. Who brought you out from the land of Egypt to be your Redeemer. I am IAH. Leviticus 23 verse 43. So that your generations may know that IAH had the sons of EZER-IAH live in booths when he brought out from the land of Egypt. I am EZER, your Redeemer. EZER is speaking to us in Leviticus 25, verse 38. I am EZER, your Redeemer, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land, Canaan, and to be your Redeemer. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 42. I say, for they are my servants whom I have brought out from the land of Egypt. They are not to be sold in slavery. In Leviticus 25, verse 55, for the sons of EZER-IAH are EZER's servants. They are EZER's servants whom he brought out from the land of Egypt. He is EZER, our Redeemer. Leviticus 26, verse 13. He is EZER, your Redeemer, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, so that you would not be their slaves. And I broke the bars of your yoke and made you walk erect. Leviticus 26, 45. EZER will remember for them the covenant with their ancestors, whom EZER brought out of the land of Egypt in the sight of the nations, that EZER will be their Redeemer. EZER is our Redeemer. Numbers 15, verse 41. EZER, your Redeemer, who brought you out from the land of Egypt to be your Redeemer. He is EZER, your Redeemer. Numbers 20, verse 16. But when we cried out to EZER, he heard our voice and sent an angel and brought us out from Egypt. Now behold, we are at Kadesh, a town on the edge of your territory. Numbers 23, verse 22. EZER bring him out of Egypt. He is for them like the horns of the wild ox. Numbers 24, verse 8. EZER bring him out of Egypt. He is for him like the horn of the wild ox. He will devour the nations who are his adversaries, and will crush their bones in pieces and shatter them with his arrows. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 27. And you grumbled in your tents and said, because EZER hates us, he has brought us out of the land of Egypt to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 20. But EZER has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace from Egypt to be a people for his own possession as today. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 37. Because EZER loved your fathers, therefore he chose their descendants after them, and he personally brought you from Egypt by his great power. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 6. EZER is your Redeemer, who brought you out of the house of slavery. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 15. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and EZER, your Redeemer, brought you out of there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore EZER, your Redeemer, commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 12. Then watch yourself that you do not forget EZER, who brought you from the land of Egypt out of the house of slavery. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 21. Then you shall say to your sons, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and EZER brought us out from Egypt with a mighty hand. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 8. But because EZER loved you and kept the oath that he swore to your fathers, EZER brought you out by a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 19. the great trials that your eyes have seen, and the signs and the wonders, and the mighty hand, and an outstretched arm, I, your Redeemer, brought you out. So shall I, your Redeemer, do to all the people of whom you are afraid. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 14. Then your heart will become proud, and you will forget. I am your Redeemer, who brought you out from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. My brothers and sisters, this is what has happened, and it's going on today. Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 26. I prayed to Aya and said, Aya, my Redeemer, do not destroy your people, even your inheritance, whom you have redeemed through your greatness, whom you have brought out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 5. But that the prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he has concealed rebellion against Aya, your Redeemer, who brought you from the land of Egypt and redeemed you from the house of slavery, to seduce you from the way that I, your Redeemer, command you to walk. So you shall purge the evil from among you. My dear brothers and sisters, that's what the preachers and the pastors are doing right today. They are trying to seduce us with the power of Lucifer to turn away from Aya. That's why they're telling you there is no more law and you have to believe in some man's blood. Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 1. Observe the month of Abib and celebrate the Passover to Aya, your Redeemer. For in the month of Abib, Aya, your Redeemer, brought you out of Egypt by night. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 1. When you go out to battle against your enemies and see horses and chariots and people more numerous than you, do not be afraid of them, for I, your Redeemer, who brought you up from the land of Egypt, is with you. We are not to be afraid. We are to expel the spirit of fear from us. When Aya take possession of us, when we give ourselves to Aya, we should have no fear. We have to love Aya. Aya is love. He gives love to us, his loving kindness. We have to show loving kindness to him, not to be afraid, not to fear, as the heathen has put in our book, but we are to love Aya with our whole heart, our whole soul, and with all our strength. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 8. And Aya brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and with great terror and with signs and wonders. As he hath done to the Egyptian, so will he do the daughter of Babylon for us today. Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 25. Then men will say, because they forsook the covenant of Aya, the mighty one of their fathers, that he made with them when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. Exactly. That's what our ancestors did. They broke the covenant they made with Aya when he took us out of the land of Egypt. Joshua chapter 24, verse 5. Then Aya sent Shemaiah and Aaron, and Aya plagued Egypt by what Aya did in its midst. And afterwards Aya brought you out. Joshua 24, verse 17. For Aya, our Redeemer, is he who brought us and our fathers up out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, and who did these great signs in our sight, and preserved us through all the way in which we went, and among all the people through whose midst we passed. Judges chapter 2, verse 1. Now the angel of Aya came up from Gilgal to Bochim. And he said, I have brought you up out of Egypt and led you into the land that I have sworn to your fathers. And I said he will never break his covenant with you. Judges chapter 2 verse 12. And they forsook EZER, the mighty one of their fathers, who brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed gods of the people who were around them, and bowed themselves down to them. They provoked EZER to anger. That's what some of our ancestors have done. They have provoked EZER with gods, the idols of the nations that were around them. And until today, their children are still doing the same thing. The time has come for us to change this. The day has come for us to turn back to EZER. The time is now. We must do it. It's urgent. Wake up, my people. We must do this. Judges chapter 6 verse 8. EZER sent a prophet to the sons of EZER-IAH, and he said to them, Thus says EZER, the Holy One of EZER-IAH, it's EZER who brought you up from Egypt and brought you out from the house of bondage. 1 Samuel chapter 8 verse 8. Like all the deeds that they have done since the day that EZER brought them up from Egypt, even to this day, they have forsaken EZER and served gods, so they are doing to us also. 1 Samuel chapter 10 verse 18. And EZER said to the sons of EZER-IAH, Thus says EZER, the Holy One of EZER-IAH, I brought you up from Egypt, and I delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians, and from the power of all the kingdoms that were oppressing you. 1 Samuel chapter 12 verse 6. Then Shemaiah said to the people, It is EZER who appointed Shemaiah and Aaron, and who brought you your fathers up from the land of Egypt. 1 Samuel chapter 12 verse 8. When Jacob went into Egypt, and your fathers cried out to EZER, then EZER sent Shemaiah and Aaron, who brought your fathers out of Egypt, and settled them in this place. Praise EZER. 2 Samuel chapter 7 verse 6. For I have not dwelt in a house since the day I brought up the sons of EZER-IAH from Egypt, even to this day, but I have been moving about in a tent, even in a tabernacle. 1 Kings chapter 8 verse 16. Since the day I brought my people EZER-IAH from Egypt, I did not choose a city out of all the tribes of EZER-IAH in which to build a house, that my name might be there, but I choose David to be over my people EZER-IAH. 1 Kings chapter 8 verse 21. There I have set a place for the ark, in which is the covenant of EZER that he made with our fathers when EZER brought them from the land of Egypt. 1 Kings 8 and 51. For they are your people and your inheritance that you have brought forth from Egypt, from the midst of the iron furnace. 1 Kings chapter 8 verse 53. For you have separated them from all the people of the earth as your inheritance, as you spoke through Shemaiah, your servant, when you brought our fathers forth from Egypt, O EZER, my Redeemer. 1 Kings chapter 9 verse 9. And they will say, because they forsook EZER, their Redeemer, who brought their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and adopted gods and worshipped them and served them. Therefore, EZER has brought all this adversity on them. 2 Kings chapter 17 verse 7. Now, this came about because the sons of EZER-IAH had sinned against EZER their Redeemer, who brought them up from the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And they had loved gods, strange redeemers. 2 Kings 17:36. But EZER, who brought you up from the land of Egypt with great power and with an outstretched arm, him you shall love, and to him you shall bow yourselves down, and to him you shall sacrifice. Psalm 81 verse 10. EZER, your Redeemer, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide, and EZER will fill it. Psalm 105 verse 37. Then he brought them out with silver and gold, and among his tribes there was not one who stumbled. Psalm 136 verse 11. And brought EZER-IAH out from their midst, for his loving kindness is everlasting. His loving kindness is everlasting. Not no fear, his loving kindness. Jeremiah chapter 2 verse 6. They did not say, where is EZER, who brought us up off the land of Egypt, who led us, though through the wilderness, through a land of desert and pits, through a land of drought and of deep darkness, through a land that no one crossed, and where no man dwelt. EZER brought us out. He brought our fathers out. He will bring us out. Jeremiah chapter 7 verse 22. For I did not speak to your fathers or command them in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt, concerning burnt offering and sacrifice. We need to praise EZER. We need to give him thanks. We need to spread our hands and ask for forgiveness and change our ways. No sacrifice. Change our ways and repent. Jeremiah chapter 11 verse 4. That EZER commanded your forefathers in the day that EZER brought them out of the land of Egypt from the iron furnace, saying, listen to my voice and do according to all that EZER command you. So you shall be my people, and EZER will be your Redeemer. Your Redeemer. For EZER solemnly warned your fathers in the day that EZER brought them up from the land of Egypt, even to this day, warning them persistently, saying, listen to my voice. Jeremiah 16 verse 14. Therefore, behold, days are coming, declares EZER, when it will no longer be said, as EZER lived, who brought up the sons of EZER-IAH out of the land of Egypt. Jeremiah chapter 22 verse 7 to 8. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares EZER, when they will no longer say, as EZER lived, who brought up the sons of EZER-IAH from the land of Egypt, but as EZER lived, who brought up and led back the descendants of the household of EZER-IAH from the north country, North America, land, and from all the countries where EZER have driven them. Then they will live on their own soil. Praise EZER, praise EZER. Jeremiah 31 verse 32. Not like the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day I took them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant they broke, although I was a husband to them, declares EZER. Jeremiah 32 verse 21. You brought your people EZER-IAH out of the land of Egypt with signs and with wonders, and with a strong hand, and with an outstretched arm, and with great terror. Jeremiah 34 verse 13. Thus says IAH, the Holy One of EZER-IAH, I made a covenant with your fathers in the day I brought them out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, saying, then IAH chapter 9 verse 15. And now, IAH, who have brought your people out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand, and have made a name for yourself, as it is this day, we have sinned, we have been wicked. Yes, this is when IAH gave us his name. Amos chapter 2 verse 10. It's IAH who brought you up from the land of Egypt, and IAH led you in the wilderness 40 years, that you might take possession of the land of the Amorites. Praise IAH. Amos chapter 3 verse 1. Hear this word that IAH has spoken against you, son of EZER-IAH, against the entire family that he brought up from the land of Egypt. Amos 9 verse 7. Here IAH is telling you, IAH's people, whom IAH called by his name, EZER-IAHites, the people who look like you, or the people you look like. IAH says, are you not as the sons of Ethiopia to me, O sons of EZER-IAH, declares IAH? Have I not brought you up, EZER-IAH, from the land of Egypt, and the Philistines from Kepha, and the Amorites from Ker? Micah chapter 6 verse 4. Indeed, I brought you up from the land of Egypt, and ransomed you from the house of slavery. And I sent before you Shemaiah, Aaron, and Miriam. Now, my brothers and sisters, I hope you have seen or heard what I've said. There were only two parties involved. It's IAH and his son and his son's sons. Only two. IAH took them out. IAH gave them his name. IAH gave them his laws. IAH gave them his promises. And IAH gave them his land. So here you have it, my brothers and sisters, and the strangers who declare their love for IAH. May IAH bless you and keep you. May IAH make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May IAH lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Now put the name of IAH upon yourselves and upon your children, and may IAH bless you. Praise IAH, praise IAH, praise IAH Almighty, praise IAH.